Chapter 2. Each is great in his own place. Part 3. Going after wealth in such a case is not bad because that wealth is for distribution. The householder is the center of life and society. It is a worship for him to acquire and spend wealth nobly. For the householder who struggles to become rich by good means and for good purpose is doing practically the same thing for the attainment of salvation as the anchorite does in his cell when he is praying. For in them we see only the different aspects of the same virtue of self surrender and self sacrifice prompted by the feeling of devotion to God and all that is His. He must struggle to acquire a good name by all means. He must not gamble. He must not move in the company of the wicked. He must not tell lies and must not be the cause of trouble to others. Often people enter into things they have not the means to accomplish, with the result that they cheat others to attain their own needs. Then there is in all things the time factor to be taken into consideration. What at one time might be a failure would perhaps at another time be a very great success. The householder must speak the truth and speak gently, using words which people like, which will do good to others. Nor should he walk nor should he talk of the business of other men. The householder, by digging tanks, by planting trees on the roadsides, by establishing rest houses for men and animals, by making roads and building bridges, goes towards the same goal as the greatest yogi. This is one part of the doctrine of Karma Yoga activity, the duty of the householder. There is a passage later on where it says that if the householder dies in battle, fighting for his country or his religion, he comes to the same goal as yogi by meditation, showing thereby that what is duty for one is not the duty for another. At the same time, it does not say that his duty is lowering than the other elevating. Each duty has its own place, and according to the circumstances in which we are placed, we must perform our duties. One idea comes out of all this, the condemnation of all weakness. This is a particular idea in all our teachings, which I like either in philosophy or in religion or in work. If you read the Vedas, you will find this word always repeated: fearlessness, fear nothing. Fear is a sign of weakness. A man must go about his duties without taking notice of the sneers and the ridicule of the world. If a man retires from the world to worship God, he must not think that those who live in the world and work for the good of the world are not worshipping God. Neither must those who live in the world for wife and children think that those who give up the world are low vagabonds. Each is great in his own place. This thought I will illustrate by a story. A certain king used to inquire of all the sannyasis that came to his country, which is a greater man, he who gives up the world and becomes a sannyasi, or he who lives in the world and performs his duty as a householder? Many wise men sought to solve the problem. Some asserted that the sannyasi was the greater, upon which the king demanded that they should prove their assertion. When they could not, he ordered them to marry and become householders. Then others came and said the householder who performs his duty is a greater man. Of them too the king demanded proofs. When they could not give him, they made him also settle down as householders. At last there came a young sannyasi, and the king similarly inquired him also. He answered, "Each, O king, is equally great in his place." "Prove this to me," said the king. "I will prove it to you," said the sannyasi, "but you must first come and live as I do for a few days, that I may be able to prove to you what I say." The king consented and followed the sannyasi out of his own territory and passed through many other countries until they came to a great kingdom. In the capital of that kingdom, a great ceremony was going on. The king and the sannyasi heard the noise of drums and music and heard also the cries. The people were assembled in the streets in gala dress, and a great proclamation was being made. The king and the sannyasi stood there to see what was going on. The crier was proclaiming, loudly that the princess, daughter of the king of that country, was about to choose a husband from among those assembled before her. It was an old custom in India for princesses to choose husband in this way. Each princess had certain ideas of the sort of man she wanted for a husband. Some would have the handsomest man, others would have only the most learned, others again the richest, and so on. All the princes of the neighborhood put on their bravest attire and presented themselves before her. Sometimes they too had their own cries to enumerate their advantages and the reasons why they hoped the princess would choose them. The princess was taken round on a throne in the most splendid array and looked at and heard about them. If she was not pleased with what she saw and heard, she said to her bearers, "Move on," and no more notice was taken of the rejected suitors. If, however, the princess was pleased with any one of them, she threw a garland of flowers over him and he became her husband. The princess of the country to which our king and the sannyasi had come was having one of the interesting ceremonies. She was the most beautiful princess in the world, and the husband of the princess would be the ruler of the kingdom after her father's death. The idea of this princess was to marry the handsomest man, but she could not find the right one to please her. Several times these meetings had taken place, but the princess could not select a husband. This meeting was the most splendid of all. The more people than ever had come to it. The princess came in on a throne, and the bearers carried her from place to place. She did not seem to care for anyone, and everyone became disappointed that this meeting also was going to be a failure. Just then came a young man, a sannyasi, handsome as if the sun had come down to the earth, and stood in one corner of the assembly, watching what was going on. The throne with the princess came near him, and as soon as she saw the beautiful sannyasi, she stopped and threw the garland over him. The young sannyasi seized the garland and threw it off, exclaiming, "What nonsense is this? I am a sannyasi. What is marriage to me?" The king of that country thought that perhaps this man was poor and so dared not many princes, and said to him, "With my daughter goes half my kingdom now, and the whole kingdom after my death," and put the garland again on the sannyasi. The young man threw it off once again, saying, "Nonsense, I do not want to marry," and walked away from the assembly. Now the princess had fallen so much in love with this young man that she said, "I must marry this man or I shall die." And she went after him to bring him back. Then our other sannyasi who had brought the king there said to him, "King, let us follow this pair." So they walked after them, but at a good distance behind. The young sannyasi who had refused to marry the princess walked out into the country for several miles. When he came to the forest and entered into it, the princess followed him, and the other two followed them. Now, this young sannyasi was well acquainted with that forest and knew all the intricate paths in it. He suddenly passed into one of these and disappeared, and the princess could not discover him. After trying for a long time to find him, she sat down under a tree and began to weep, for she did not know the way out. Then our king and the other sannyasi came up to her and said, "Do not weep. We will show you the way out of the forest, but it is too dark for us to find it now. Here is a big tree. Let us rest under it, and in the morning we will go early and show you the road." Now a little bird and his wife and their three little ones lived on that tree in a nest. This little bird looked down and saw the three people under the tree and said to his wife, "My dear, what shall I do? Here are some guests in the house, and it is winter and we have no fire." So he flew away and got a bit of burning firewood in his beak and dropped it before the guests, to which they added fuel and made a blazing fire. But the little bird was not satisfied. He said again to his wife, "My dear, what shall I do? There is nothing to give to these people to eat, and they are hungry. They are householders. It is our duty to feed anyone who comes to the house. I must do what I can. I can give them my body." So he plunged into the midst of the fire and perished. The guests saw him falling and tried to save him, but he was too quick for them. The little bird's wife saw what her husband did, and she said, "Here are three persons and only one little bird for them to eat. It is not enough. It is my duty as a wife not to let my husband's effort go in vain. Let them have my body also." Then she flew into the fire and was burned to death. Then the three baby birds, when they saw what was done, and that there was still not enough food for the three guests, said, "Our parents have done what they could, and it is still not enough. It is our duty to carry the work of our parents. Let our bodies go too. And they all dashed into the fire also. Amazed at what they saw, the three people could not, of course, eat these birds. They passed the night without food, and in the morning the king and the sannyasi showed the princess the way, and she went back to her father. Then the sannyasi said to the king, King, you have seen that each is great in its own place. If you want to live in the world, live like those birds, ready at any moment to sacrifice yourself for others. If you want to renounce the world, be like that young man to whom the most beautiful woman and a kingdom were as nothing. If you want to be a householder, hold your life a sacrifice for the welfare of others. And if you choose a life of renunciation, do not even look at beauty and money and power. Each is great in his own place, but the duty of one is not the duty of the other.